as Kamala Harris and Liz Cheney barnstorm the Rust Belt, we know we're going to hear from MSNBC about this. We know they're going to sing the praises of this brilliant strategic move in the closing weeks of the campaign. And so Morning Joe woke up Chris Matthews early and you said, maybe leave the Jameson out of your coffee this morning because we're going to need you to talk. So they bring on Chris Matthews, and he goes on a monologue.
Please don't insult an intern before you come on.
Well, he doesn't even have to. He doesn't even have to think about...
We're trying to rehabilitate you.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't have to think about the interns anymore. Now he could just think about Liz Cheney. He could just close his eyes and think about Liz Cheney because, boy, does he have the hots for her. So here's Chris Matthews.
You're welcome, folks. You're never getting that image out of your head.
Here he goes.
I wouldn't think a few years ago I would ever be singing the praises of a Cheney member of the family, a member of that family. I really did not like the Iraq War, and I didn't like the neocons, and Cheney was leading them all, and he took us into that war, and it killed almost 200,000 people in Iraq, and it served no purpose. They had a bunker, a barrier against Iran, and they got rid of it.
I mean, the cognitive dissonance of these people is amazing. He's about to gush about Liz Cheney. He's already gushing. You can already see he has a smile on his face. Mm-hmm. And in his preamble, it's funny, man. I love Liz Cheney. She's amazing. I really didn't like what the Cheneys did in Iraq, where they killed a couple 100,000 people and, dismantled the bulwark against the other enemies. I really didn't like that at all. Like, you could incorporate that into a sort of expression of praise for someone, like just to have a smile on your face while reciting that information is amazing. But he does. Here, I'll start this one more time.
This is why, if you have woken up from this kind of media, some people were never drawn in by it. I think that's partly generational. But if you've ever really believed in this stuff, when you watch it now, man, it is just like, what was I thinking? Because and I do know what I was thinking. Like it's very, if you're constantly exposed to this, it massages your brain into accepting absolutely bizarre, absurd, and contradictory formulations, like any good propaganda does.
Right.
By omission, by repetition, by carefully, strategically focusing on what's in this hand and not what's in this hand.
Right.
Over time, you wind up accepting a view of reality that serves the elite class, and that the smartest of them, the ones who really run shit, they don't believe in themselves.
Right.
This is for the plebs who watch this stuff.
Yes, absolutely. All right, here he goes.
Be singing the praises of a Cheney member of the family, a member of that family. I really did not like the Iraq War, and I didn't like the neocons, and Cheney was leading them all, and he took us into that war, and it killed almost 200,000 people in Iraq, and it served no purpose. They had a bunker, a barrier against Iran, and they got rid of it. Anyway, she is a character almost out of the movies, out of
but anyway,
A Man for All Seasons.
But anyway, yeah, no, I really hated the Iraq War and all the just needless death and carnage it caused. But anyway, Liz Cheney, great hero,
character almost out of the anyway. She is a character almost out of the movies, out of A Man for All Seasons. I've never seen a more heroic figure than Liz Cheney. She lost her state probably forever. She lost her party. She lost her leadership in the Republican House. She could have been on her way to Speaker. It was very probable. She gave it all away in the interest of truth.
She gave away her popularity in the great state of Wyoming to have a career as media darling of the entire establishment. She gave up Wyoming for that, folks. Yes, she surrendered the state of Wyoming. Yeah. There are a lot of moose out there who had high hopes for her. Moose in Wyoming? No, they're not moose. What do they got out there? Bison, right? Yeah, that's what
Bison,
it is.
Yeah.
Moose. Not moose.
She had to take a job at the local plant pulling apart chickens. She's really sticking by her principles. Yeah, see, this is how privileged these people are. The idea that you don't get to be Speaker of the House that's a big sacrifice. Listen, this bitch was born rich, and she's gonna die rich. Don't tell me about her fucking sacrifice. Oh, she didn't get to climb all the way up the corrupt ladder of power in Washington. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I never seen more bravery than this. Really.
and
Really.
rich on what? Rich on literal blood money. It's not like
Right.
her father was an overpaid baseball player who left her a trust fund. You know,
Right.
no, this is literal blood money. This is Halliburton. Yeah,
And also remember, this is not a sacrifice. This is one part of the aristocracy defending its privileges and positions against upstarts in the aristocracy. That's
right.
what this is. Like
Exactly. Yes.
what we talked about with Caleb, he referenced that book that apparently is hard to get, Yankees and Cowboy Wars. But he talks about it quite a bit in his own book about Kamala Harris, that you have these, more Rockefeller oriented rich people. And then you have what Trump and Musk represent, the more industrialists, more pro growth, more traditional social values. But yeah, I mean that's why she's taking that stand. This is a part of the aristocracy that's deeply offended at the idea of MAGA.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. All right, we'll let this play through.
That's what she stood for. It's amazing to me how few people have gotten behind her, but now one person that's got behind her is Kamala Harris. And those sitting together, those two women, as you say, on that stage is remarkable because there's such courage there from Liz Cheney. And I cannot say anything that would stop me from saying she's been unbelievable. And I think now if they use her for the next 2 weeks, I also want to say something about the Democrats. If you're going to use her, repay her when you get in office. Don't just act like you're giving a little nod to a Republican. Clean up some of your act. You got problems, Democrats. You don't have all the answers. You got to do much tougher action on the border. You have to get serious about it and come up with a
much tougher action on the border. Isn't that what Donald Trump called for 9 years ago, and you all called him a racist for it? It's funny how they have just completely given him the one issue that they were most offended by of his 9 years ago. It's funny how now they are just like unapologetically trying to get as close to Trump's border policies as they possibly can, right? That's amazing. No, give her. He basically wants her in the cabinet. Give her the Department of Homeland Security. How about Secretary of State? You know what? Make her the president. She should run. Get Kamala out of there.
Well, but you know what? Not that Chris Matthews saying it is going to have any impact, but they might be right out ahead of him. That is something they would totally do to troll MAGA. Put her in the cabinet.
I mean, it wouldn't just be a MAGA troll. This would be a long-term sort of pitch to the new coalition that they want.
Sure.
You know, I mean, this started with Hillary. It was kicked into high gear under Biden, and now it's in overdrive. Now it's to the point where the reason they are running as close as they are to Trump in the polls is precisely because of this now almost 10-year-long explicit pitch to affluent suburban conservative independents who usually vote Republican. Now they want to get them into the Democratic Party, and they can because, look, I know people who have gone from, Romney and Trump voters who then voted for Biden in 2020. Once they get hooked into that, they get hooked into the media ecosystem. That's the really powerful thing about shows like this is that, I know someone, I won't say who, they're a very, very dear friend of mine. They voted for Obama the first time, Romney in 2012, Trump in 2016, Biden in 2020. They're the exact kind of voter who I might expect to revert to Trump because of inflation and stuff. But no, they're voting for Kamala now, no matter what, because when they voted for Biden last time, they got hooked into that media ecosystem. Now they watch Midas Touch on YouTube. Now they watch, Politics Girl. Now they watch MSNBC. Once you get hooked in, it's hard to break back out. That's the point of shows like this. And that's why the Democrats are trying to suck as many of these people into their party, because once they get them to pull the lever, they can hook them in for life. And that's why the polls are as close as they are, because look at Democrats underperforming with African-American voters, not tanking as much as they were a few months ago because of a lot of mistakes that Trump has made, in my view. but they're underperforming with African Americans, tanking with Latinos, really tanking with Muslims, badly underperforming with young voters, especially young men, and yet it's still close. It's still close. Why? Because this kind of shit works, and the kind of voters they are
and because
successfully
there
roping
are
in
more
votes.
whites.
They
Because
vote.
there are more whites. There are
Yes.
more whites in the voting population. Democrats can gain much less a percentage of whites and completely overwhelm a
Right.
large percentage of blacks or Latinos moving to the Republican Party. They're doing 2% better with whites. That
Right.
outweighs, I don't know the exact percentage, but a large percentage move in minority voters. That's why it's close.
And
That's
also,
why,
these whites in particular vote a lot.
right,
Right?
disproportionate.
Yes.
They disproportionately vote. But the question is, and I wrote an article about this a while ago. There was a flip in the Republican and Democratic Party. What's his name? Dinesh D'Souza's kind of built a whole career on pretending that never happened, and that the Democrats today are the descendants of the Democrats of old, and they're
Oh, the KKK
really
and
they're
shit like
really
that, right?
not.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's made a whole career out of
Yeah.
making assuming his audience doesn't know that, which they don't.
Right.
Um,
It's a fair assumption in his case.
Fair assumption. In the Venn diagram, I'm betting Daryl Cooper's audience and Dinesh
Yeah,
D'Souza's
right.
probably overlap quite a lot. But yeah, the reason that happened was because the bases switched.
Right.
Now, that is clearly happening today, because the reason that so many non-white voters are moving into the Republican Party is because class defines people's voting patterns more than race does. And the working class is becoming more and more alienated from the Democratic Party, partly because of their cultural signaling. Look at that room. Is that relatable for a working class person of any identity? Right. Do those people seem like workers to you? Can they speak to working class concerns in a way that's convincing and authentic? The Democrats, since Clinton took over the party, since the New Democrats took over, they have done everything they can to tell working people they don't like them. They don't like them personally. They don't like them culturally. It oozes from their very pores that they see them as the deplorables. They see them as a bunch of Archie bunkers. I always say, go back to All in the Family. Mike and Gloria grew up. They took over the levers of society. And as you would expect, they tried to excise Archie Bunker from their coalition. They didn't want him. And that's how that eventually they got the message. And they started moving over to the Republican Party. But the Republicans are also owned by Wall Street. They're not interested in doing anything for that coalition. So that's the real question. Last time there was this switch, it made sense because the one party was advocating for those voters. Now you got two parties, that one of which is better at culturally signaling to those voters, but neither of which is really interested in serving those voters. So where does that go? I mean, that's a very unstable system. Aristotle believed oligarchies are one of the most unstable forms of government, because ultimately the people are going to rise up against it. They're going to get so frustrated by this elite class that's sucking up all the resources that eventually they're going to become ungovernable.
Yes. Well said.
Please clap.